Hello everyone, welcome back. If you were here for yesterday's episode, you saw that I went over a lot of big names through the Bible in the Old Testament. We went over Adam, Noah, Moses, and King David. And if you remember from that episode, I found out where the Ten Commandments came from. I did not know that they directly came from Moses. So we're going to go into that today. We're going to go into the Ten Commandments and where it originated, how it happened biblically. I have my notes here. I have my starting question. Where did the Ten Commandments come from? Which is in part a rhetorical question. I already knew the answer, but I think framing it like that helps me get into the verses and chapters. So we're going to go over, there's not so many Bible verses in this as much as it's just notes and explanations, but if it is a Bible verse, I'll say so. So, the Ten Commandments originate directly from God's revelation to Moses after the Israelites were freed from slavery in Egypt. So, if we remember from yesterday's episode when we were going through Moses' life, he leads the Israelites out of slavery from the Pharaoh in Egypt. And he does this by God allowing him to part the Red Sea. The Israelites, he leads them through the water, and then God releases the water back onto their enemies, the Egyptians. So 3 months after Moses is walking through the desert with the Israelites is when God does this. They are not merely rules, the Ten Commandments. They form the central covenant agreement between God and his chosen people, establishing Israel's identity, morality, and relationship to the divine. And we're going to get into this, but I want to make this a point now. When they left the Egyptian rule, I mean, they had to start at ground zero as a community. There was no sense of identity, because their entire identity was based on them being, I think, Hebrew, and being under Egyptian rule. So they had to start from ground zero on their identity, on their rules, on, just developing a society. These are not verses, but this is citations. Exodus 19:20, God speaks the commandments aloud to the entire nation. Exodus 31:18, God writes them on stone tablets with the finger of God. So this is the process of the Ten Commandments. And then Deuteronomy 5, Moses retells the events to the next generation. So he's telling the story later in the biblical story. After leaving Egypt, Israel had, like I said, or was getting at, no law code, no political structure, no identity beyond slavery, and then the Ten Commandments became the foundation of Israel's moral and civil life, the core of the covenant between God and his people, and the root of much Western moral tradition. So that's kind of the everlasting impact that the Ten Commandments still have today, based on where it came from. Before the commandments are spoken, so now we're right before the 3 months, I imagine, after the escapade with the Egyptians, God descends on Mount Sinai in terrifying majesty. And this is an actual verse, Exodus 19:18. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord, in all capitals, descended on it in fire. That's the end of that verse. Thunder, lightning, trumpet blasts, and earthquake-like shaking fill the scene. This is one of the few times in the entire Bible when God reveals himself to be an entire nation, or reveals himself to an entire nation at once. God speaks the Ten Commandments aloud. In Exodus 20, God speaks directly to the people. The event is so overwhelming that Israel begs Moses, and this is an actual verse, "Speak to us yourself and we will listen, but do not have God speak to us or we will die," in Exodus 20:19. So apparently God's voice or commands or tone or the way that he was revealing himself to the people was terrifying to the people. They would rather Moses remain the mediator between God and them because they do not want to hear God in all of his glory. Or however God depicted himself, it was something they did not want to hear. So they're like, Moses, you take that, you're the mediator, we're not trying to hear all this yelling, or however he said it. From this point forward, Moses becomes the mediator between God and the Israelites. God writes them on stone. This is an actual verse, Exodus 31:18. He gave Moses the 2 tablets of the covenant law, tablets of stone inscribed by the finger of God. Sorry, let me read that better. He gave Moses the 2 tablets of the covenant law, tablets of stone inscribed by the finger of God. This sets the 10 Commandments apart. All other laws are spoken to Moses. These are written by God himself. So apparently literally inscribed by God. Like, this is not, at least in what it's trying to communicate here, Moses is not the one that wrote these. God himself wrote these and gave it to Moses. And then there was a golden calf incident in the 40 years at the desert. So 3 months after going into the desert, after leading the Israelites out of the Egyptians, or Egypt territory, 3 months after is when he was given the 10 Commandments. So after this, during the 40 years in the desert that he was leading the Israelites, there's a golden calf incident. While Moses is on the mountain for 40 days, Israel grows afraid and creates a golden calf. This is in Exodus 32, not a verse. Moses descends, sees their idolatry, and breaks the tablets in righteous anger. So the tablets that God gave him originally, the 10 Commandments, the original 10 Commandments that were given to Moses, he has to go to the mountain for 40 days. And in this 40 days, the people, I think, if from the Bible, think he died. Because apparently there was a lot of fog and apparently a lot of like fire and terrifying looking things. And, he just disappears into the mist. So the people start freaking out. The people don't know where to go. They're already said they're not trying to hear God's voice. So, they don't know the commands. They don't know the identity. They don't know they don't remember everything to follow, so they create what is it? Yeah. Israel grows afraid and creates a golden calf. So out of their own inner turmoil of feeling void of direction, they had to create this symbol or this idol to worship, to just give them some sort of existential basis. They didn't know how to operate without something to worship, so they got a golden calf, which is idolatry, which in the 10 Commandments is already said, which we'll get into, but you can't be doing that. You're putting something before God. So they got afraid after 40 days or however long, and then Moses comes back from the mountain, sees them doing that, and then breaks the tablets in righteous anger. So, he's not chill with this. God rewrites them. So the original commandments got broken. We had to get them again. God commands Moses to cut 2 new stone tablets. So Moses makes 2 new tablets. And in Exodus 34:1, it says, I will write on them and the words that were on the first tablets. I will write on them the words that were on the first tablets. This signifies renewal. God restores the covenant after Israel's failure. So I guess this is probably an emphasis on God's forgiveness and mercy. Even though they messed up, and even after God revealed himself, they still messed up. He's like, okay, I guess I'll make them again. The 10 Commandments, Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. Okay, these are the 10 Commandments. And I tried to get them best I could in their original meaning. And what I mean by that is these original commandments were written in Hebrew, so I'm trying to get the closest Hebrew definition that I can get, because I want it to be the original commandments. So, number 1, in the 10 Commandments, you shall have no other gods before me, meaning no rival allegiances. God demands exclusive loyalty. These are not verses. No alternate foundations for identity, meaning, or authority, and idolatry begins in the heart before the hands. So this is putting something before God. This could be money. This could be, what's the exact words? You shall have no other gods before me. So I guess worship would be whatever you're putting your worship and your highest level of suffering into is your God. So if you're trying to make as much money as you can to, smoke crack and gamble, and that's all you do is smoke crack and gamble, the more that you will push everything else to the side to achieve these things, the more it, by definition, becomes your God. Because, there's a level of reprioritization in yourself that you can rewire and push some things to the front that you deem worthy of your worship. And sometimes a lot of people say that they're not worshiping these things, but their actions do not portray that. Their actions make them a liar. So yeah, what are you worshiping, I guess, would be the question for that, for the first commandment. You shall have no other gods before me, no alternate foundations for identity, meaning, or authority. So yeah, if you're finding the most amount of your identity in something other than God, that is idolatry, which goes into the second commandment. You shall not make for yourself an idol. So this is where, this is some crazy irony about the Israelites while Moses was up on the mountain, because, based on the timing of this, they got the 10 Commandments inscribed by God himself before Moses goes to the mountains for 40 days. So they already knew not to make an idol. And yet, in a 40-day time span, their fear and, in this context, faithlessness, despite God revealing himself in a very major way, just shows their fallibility, their willingness to sin. So number 2, you shall not make for yourself an idol. Not just statues, which is what the Israelites were guilty of. It forbids attempts to control or shrink God, protects the transcendence of God from human manipulation. So this could be, and a lot of people do this, I did this, for sure, when you paint out what you want God to be rather than how he's revealing himself. And sometimes people paint out how they want God to be to better fit their agendas, to better fit their sense of identity, which goes into the first commandment. You can't embellish God as something he's not. You can't make God a gift wrapped in dazzled plastic. Like, God's going to reveal himself to you as he is. Is pretty much what he's saying. You cannot create an idol of him unless it's him. The only idol of him is him in actuality. And the 10 Commandments are a revealer of that. It's like, no, if you go outside these 10 Commandments, you are now creating a version of me that is inaccurate, that goes against me, in fact. So this is the process of God revealing himself through the story in the Bible. But that's number 2. Number 3, you shall not take the name of the Lord in vain. And this is similar, honestly. 1, 2, and 3 are similar in an interesting way. And Jesus, we're going to get into Jesus at the end, how this all ties into Jesus. That's like the main point of all these. He condenses them down into something interesting that I think is pretty cool. But it translates literally, from my notes, in Hebrew, to do not lift up God's name for emptiness. So this is using God for reputation or vanity, vain implications. Not primarily about profanity, forbids invoking God's authority to justify evil, prohibits spiritual manipulation, false oaths, or casual misuse of sacred things, protects God's reputation among his people. So this is getting across the idea of don't get it twisted. Forbids invoking God's authority to justify evil. So sometimes someone manipulative can bring God into the mix in a way to keep you small or, keep you gaslit, which a lot of people that have walked away from Christianity, myself included, are. I did this. It forbids invoking God's authority, or I was subject to this. Forbids invoking God's authority to justify evil. A lot of wars have happened in God's name. A lot of extremism in God's name has happened that have created terrible things. And I think that this is trying to emphasize that point, to protect God's reputation and to not not confuse someone's depiction of God for what God actually is trying to reveal himself as. So that's number 3. Number 4, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And remember here means to actively preserve. And this establishes rest as a divine human right, confronts slavery. Israel had just been freed, roots human dignity in God, not productivity, and symbolizes God's rhythm and authority over time itself. And I think this also emphasizes the difference between a human and an animal, or a human and a robot. God doesn't want slaves, is a point that he's making here. He wants you to enjoy the fruits of rest, but it comes with both. You can't just sit in rest all the time, but you also can't just sit and work all the time. So there's a balance here. Number 5, honor your father and mother. This is attempting to sustain generational wisdom, passing down the torch, reinforces societal stability. It establishes a hierarchy, or a fixed hierarchy of leaders and followers, protects the structure of family, the first command with a promise that you may live long. So this commandment probably clashes the most with modern thinking, at least depending on your come up. I mean, I didn't have a dad, and I know a lot of people didn't have a dad, and a lot of people, believe it or not, didn't have a mom. But yeah, it's to honor your father and mother. How are you supposed to honor your absent father? And I don't mean absent as in away working or establishing. I mean away because they couldn't bother with the responsibility of having a child. So, you know, a commandment like this can kind of sound taboo in that lighting, but I could see it being very different for that time. So that's number 5. Number 6, you shall not murder. Unlawful killing, not kill, a precise legal moral term. So it's not thou shalt not kill, which I know we all have heard, but it's thou shalt not murder, and there is a difference between killing and murdering someone. Killing someone in self-defense is different than killing someone doing nothing wrong. It's no longer killing, it is murdering. You are unlawfully taking someone's life, or unjustly taking someone's life. But in you shall not murder, it protects the sanctity of life, prohibits vengeance, malice, and premeditation, lays the foundation for ethical justice instead of personal retaliation. So here, the commandment is trying to emphasize towards or against revenge, resentment, envy, anything that puts hatred from yourself onto someone else. And I guess hatred that's unwarranted, or maybe not hatred at all, but yeah, if you're killing someone in self-defense, it's very different. If someone's coming at you with a knife, and everyone that you know, and then you just, grab a knife as well, and you happen to win, and win here sadly means kill. You've killed someone, but not murdered them. Number 7, you shall not commit adultery. This protects covenant loyalty, guards families, inheritance, and trusts, and represents God's own covenant faithfulness. So, no affairs, no cheating. Cheating is wrong. Cheating on your partner is wrong. Sleeping with someone else who's married, sleeping with their wife is wrong. It erodes trust. It breaks up communities and breaks up how people interact with one another. It's just it's tricky, and God commands against it. Number 8, you shall not steal. So property theft, kidnapping a person is theft, economic exploitation. So finding a way to flip the system and maybe steal from a group of people that have money for yourself. Deceptive business practices, same idea, just, using intellect and or strategy for you to deliberately take from others to make sure more hits your bank account. So, that's wrong. That is a type of stealing. Number 9, You shall not bear false witness. And it literally translates to do not answer against your neighbor as a lying witness. So originally a courtroom command extends to slander, false accusation, and manipulation. Protects truth as a foundation of justice. So don't claim to see something that you didn't see. Don't claim to have not seen something that you did see. This is an oath, essentially. This is honesty and sincerity. It's say what you know and know what you say. Don't act like you're not. Don't act like you're something that you're not. Don't pretend to have seen something that you did not see. Extends to slander, false accusation, and manipulation. So this is kind of similar to the last one, as in theft, how theft can be manipulative and theft can be something that's, stealing when someone's looking the other way. If you bear as a false witness, it can extend to slander, false accusations, and manipulation. It's coming after someone's reputation and trying to slimily get away with making them look bad for your own personal gain or maybe someone else's personal gain. So that's wrong, to bear false witness. And number 10, you shall not covet, to deeply desire, to crave. The only commandment about inner desire addresses the root of envy, discontent, comparison, and idolatry. Reveals God's concern with the inward motives of the heart. Foreshadows Jesus' teachings, lust equals adultery in the heart. So this is attacking a pride, a type of pride. It's saying that there's something more important or that there's something missing with God. God is trying to make the point, especially in the first two commandments, that is not the case. God is more than all you need. God is the creator of everything around you and you yourself. What could you possibly put beyond him? So it is against the 10 Commandments to put something, to worship anything in the place of God. So yeah, there's the 10 Commandments. They were given to Moses. I did not know that. Inscribed by God himself 3 months after leading the Israelites out of Egypt. So, with the 10 Commandments in mind and the canon or the origin of it, let's do Jesus in the 10 Commandments. Let's see how Jesus fits in this, even though that was over 1,000 years before Jesus was when the 10 Commandments were given to Moses and everything with Moses happened. The story of the 10 Commandments doesn't end with Moses and the Israelites. It reaches its fullness in Jesus. Jesus does not abolish the commandments. He reveals their deepest spiritual intention. In Matthew 5:17 we read, "I have not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill it." Where the commandments regulate external actions, Jesus exposes the inner condition they were always pointing toward. So he's saying here in the 10 Commandments, a lot of it is external sin. It's doing things in the material world, actions that are, besides the 10th one. Do not murder, then, in Jesus becomes him addressing anger, contempt, and dehumanizing thoughts. Do not commit adultery. Jesus addresses inward desire and covenantal purity. Jesus says to look at a woman lustfully is to already commit adultery. So he's taking one of the 10 Commandments and multiplying it by 100. Do not bear false witness. Establishes integrity in every word, not just courtroom speech. Honor your parents. Extends to honoring all God-given relationships. So love your neighbor as yourself. It's not emphasizing just your direct parents. It's emphasizing every single person. No idols. Includes internal idols, identity anchors, and false sources of meaning. Jesus doesn't replace the 10 Commandments. He compresses them into their essential core. So like I was saying earlier, he takes the 10 Commandments and condenses them into 2 categories. Love God with all your heart, which condenses Commandments 1 through 4, and love your neighbor as yourself, which condenses Commandments 5 through 10. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets, it says in Matthew 22:40. This is not simplification, it is revelation. Jesus reveals that love is the animating force beneath every commandment. He embodies perfectly and without failure every commandment's purpose. He is loyal to the Father alone, Commandment 1. He reveals God's true image without reducing him, Commandment 2. He bears God's name with absolute truth, Commandment 3. He honors God's rhythm and rest, Commandment 4. He honors the community into which he was born, Commandment 5. He protects and restores life, Commandment 6. He is faithful and covenant true, commandment 7. He steals nothing and gives everything, commandment 8. He speaks only truth, commandment 9. He covets nothing, for he lacks nothing, commandment 10. In this way, Jesus keeps the commandments, fulfills them, embodies them, and reframes them around the condition of the heart rather than mere behavior. So Jesus, in his life and in his actions, takes the 10 commandments, abides by them perfectly by the Christian God standards, and then times them all by 100, really. This is where Jesus' sinless life really becomes emphasized, especially in the context of the 10 Commandments and the fact that he gave weight to the 10 Commandments. The way that he lived by and through them signified the legitimacy of Moses and the 10 Commandments that he was given. But then Jesus comes as the perfect form of these 10 Commandments, lives them out perfectly, and takes their external implications and attaches them to your heart rather than the action. So Jesus is a radical person in that sense, which is why he's the most famous man that's ever lived. Where Moses descends the mountain with the law written on stone, Jesus introduces the new covenant in which the law is written on hearts. And this was in Jeremiah 31:33. It's not a direct verse. Moses mediates the covenant between God and Israel. Jesus becomes the final mediator between God and humanity. Jesus becomes the ultimate mediator between God and humanity. It's not 10 commandments through God. It's him living out them not even as if. If Jesus is real, he is living out through knowing them, through being a direct revelation of them in their most fundamental essence. Moses brings God's law to the people. Jesus brings the people to God. The commandments reveal God's character and principle. Jesus reveals God's character in person. The commandments show God's character. Jesus shows God's character in flesh. So, this shows you, if there's one thing that this channel is revolving around right now, I am trying to show you how time unfolds onto itself, how thousands of years layer onto themselves to create something cohesive. And I'm making these claims in the context of the biblical canon, and if it's true. And Jesus being referred to as the second Adam, I want that to have relevance. And Jesus being called the Son of David, I want that to have relevance. And then in Jesus referring to the law that Moses was given, I want that to have relevance. So the relevance, which I've already said, is Moses was showing God through God's words. Moses was a mediator. He did not have direct communion with God. Jesus, however, did. Jesus took the commandments that Moses was given and lived them out actually. When he dies on the cross, when he sees that in the future he is going to die a excruciating death, and he tells his followers this. He tells them that he is going to be killed. And the fact that he still shows up and does what he needs to do, he's abiding by, he's taking the essence that the 10 Commandments were translated through, and instead just embodying it as himself and in the flesh, God in human form. That's what I'm trying to tie this all into. I'm still making sense of all this, by the way. So yeah, the 10 Commandments came from the 10 Commandments came from Moses, from God, given to Moses. Jesus lived the 10 Commandments out in a way that made them seem irrelevant, yet he said they were perfectly relevant. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. This is all new for me. Still learning. If you got any requests or things you want me to go over, let me know. Thank you.